I'm Natasha, 32 female. I'm an architect living in a city I've grown to love, in a house I designed myself. My life felt like a carefully constructed blueprint, with every beam and joint perfectly placed, especially since my amazing fiancé, Ethan, moved in. We were building a future together, and the final piece, or so I thought, was celebrating our engagement with the people who were supposed to be my foundation, my family. But I was about to learn that the foundation they stood on was one I had paid for, and the one they were building for themselves excluded me entirely. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The afternoon sun streamed into the backyard of our new home, illuminating the string lights Ethan and I had spent the morning hanging. The air was filled with the scent of grilled vegetables from Ethan's restaurant, which he'd brought over to cater our small engagement party. Our closest friends were scattered around the lawn, laughing, drinking champagne, and celebrating the life we were about to build. It was, for all intents and purposes, a perfect day. Ethan, with his chef's hands that could be both strong and incredibly gentle, found my waist and pulled me close. "Happy?" he murmured into my hair. I leaned back against his chest, sighing contentedly. "More than happy, it's perfect." But even as I said it, a tiny, nagging shadow lingered in the back of my mind. My parents, Richard and Diane, and my Uncle Greg were not here. I glanced at my phone for the 10th time, hoping to see a new message, but there was only the one from my mom, Diane, sent a few hours earlier. "So sorry, sweetie. Your father isn't feeling up to a party today, and Greg is going to stay with us to keep him company. We're so thrilled for you, though. We'll celebrate properly soon." It was a plausible excuse. My dad, Richard, was 62 and had his share of aches and pains. He'd retired from his job as a sales manager a few years back and often complained about his energy levels. Still, it felt off. This wasn't just any party, it was their only daughter's engagement party. I had called them the week before, bubbling with excitement after Ethan proposed on a hike overlooking the city. My mom had sounded ecstatic, my dad gruffly pleased, in his typical way. They promised they wouldn't miss the celebration for the world. "Are you thinking about them?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. He knew how much I wanted them here. "A little," I admitted. "I just wish Dad was feeling better. It feels strange without them." Ethan squeezed my shoulder. "Hey, they'll be here for the wedding. That's the main event. Today is for us and our friends. Let's enjoy it." He was right, of course. I forced a smile and let him lead me back to our guests. For the next few hours, I pushed the disappointment down. I toasted with my friends, accepted their heartfelt congratulations, and admired the beautiful diamond on my finger, a symbol of a new family I was creating with Ethan. My family has always been complicated. I was an only child, and my parents had me later in life. Growing up, money was always a topic of hushed, stressed-out conversations behind closed doors. My dad had been a decent sales manager, but poor investments and a taste for a lifestyle just beyond his reach meant they were always playing catch-up. My Uncle Greg, my dad's brother, was the opposite. He owned a successful car dealership and always seemed to have cash to spare, a fact he never let anyone forget. He was flashy and loud, the type of person who measured worth by the brand of your watch. When I graduated from architecture school and landed a great job at a prestigious firm, the dynamic in our family shifted. Suddenly, I was the one with a stable, significant income. A few years later, when my dad was forced into early retirement and their finances took a nosedive, they came to me. Their mortgage was becoming unmanageable, they said. They were on the verge of losing the house I grew up in. I couldn't let that happen. Without much hesitation, I sat down with them and worked out a plan. I would take over the mortgage payments. It was a huge financial commitment, but they were my parents. It felt like the right thing to do. I set up an automatic payment from my account every month, and for the last 5 years, that payment had gone through like clockwork. They were grateful, almost excessively so at first. My mom would call me her guardian angel, and my dad would tell me I was a better daughter than he deserved. But over time, their gratitude became expectation. My monthly contribution wasn't just helping them survive, It was funding a comfortable retirement I was beginning to realize they hadn't planned for. There were new golf clubs for my dad, weekend trips for my mom and her friends, and out that I knew they couldn't afford on their own. I tried not to think about it too much. I was happy to help. But the excuse for missing my engagement party stung more than I wanted to admit. It felt less like a health issue and more like an inconvenience. They weren't up for a party that was celebrating my future, a future I was building while still carrying the weight of their past. As the party wound down and our friends started to leave, the feeling of unease returned. I helped Ethan clear plates, the joyful energy of the day slowly fading with the sunlight. "I'm going to call Mom again," I said, pulling out my phone, "just to check on Dad." I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Diane?" I hung up without leaving a message. Odd, she always had her phone on her. I tried my dad's phone, straight to voicemail. Then my Uncle Greg's, also straight to voicemail. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. What if something was really wrong? What if Dad had been taken to the hospital? "No answer," I told Ethan, trying to keep my voice steady. "None of them are picking up." "Maybe they turned their phones off to let your dad rest," he suggested, ever the voice of reason. "Try not to worry, Natasha. I'm sure everything is fine. You'll probably get a call from them in the morning." I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. The excuse felt thin, and their sudden inaccessibility felt like a curtain being drawn. It was a feeling I was starting to get used to with my family. The sense that I was on the outside of something, a supportive pillar to a structure whose inner rooms I was no longer invited into. That evening, as Ethan and I cleaned up the last of the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that the small shadow I'd felt earlier was growing, stretching across the perfect day and threatening to swallow it whole. The silence from my family was deafening, and I had no idea it was just the prelude to a storm. Later that night, after all the cleaning was done, Ethan and I curled up on the couch, exhausted but happy. The house was quiet, filled with the warm afterglow of the party. Ethan was scrolling through his phone, looking at photos our friends had already tagged us in. He chuckled, turning the screen to show me a picture of us mid-toast, my eyes sparkling, his face beaming with pride. "Look at us," he said softly. "We look good." "We do," I agreed, a genuine smile returning to my face for the first time in hours. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was overthinking things. I decided to do one last mindless scroll through social media before we went to bed, hoping to distract myself from the lingering worry about my family. I opened the app, my thumb swiping through the usual feed of friends' babies, vacation photos, and political memes. And then I saw it. The notification at the top of the screen was innocuous enough. "Greg last name, tagged you in a photo." My heart gave a little jolt. Uncle Greg. Maybe this was an apology post, a picture of him and my parents raising a glass to us from their living room. I tapped on it, my stomach fluttering with a strange mix of hope and dread. The image loaded, and the air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. It wasn't a picture from their living room. It was a group photo, bright and sunny, taken on a wide, sandy beach. There in the center stood my Uncle Greg, arm in arm with my parents, Richard and Diane. All 3 of them were beaming, tanned, and wearing festive vacation clothes. My dad, the man who supposedly wasn't feeling up to a party, was holding a colorful drink with a little umbrella in it, looking healthier and happier than I'd seen him in years. Behind them, the turquoise ocean stretched to the horizon. Several other cousins and extended family members were in the photo, all smiling, all clearly on a trip together. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The beach, the smiles, the complete, undeniable picture of health and happiness. It was so jarringly different from the story I had been told. Then, my eyes fell on the caption Greg had written, and the knot in my stomach turned to ice. It read, "Finally together again, the whole family celebrating life in the Florida Keys. The only thing missing is our busy architect Natasha, but we're thinking of her. Family first, beach vibes, making memories." My phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Ethan looked up, startled. "Tasha, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I could only point a trembling finger at the phone on the floor. He picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion. I watched his face as he read the caption and took in the photo. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a cold, quiet anger I had rarely seen in him. He looked from the phone to me, his eyes full of a mixture of pity and rage. "They're in Florida," he said, his voice dangerously low. "They lied to you." The words hit me like a physical blow. They lied. They weren't at home nursing my father's mysterious ailment. They were on a family vacation, a vacation I knew nothing about, a vacation they chose to take on the weekend of my engagement party. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just declined an invitation, they had concocted a lie to cover up the fact that they had better plans. Plans that didn't include me. The phrase, "finally together again," echoed in my head. What did that even mean? I was part of the family, or was I? I grabbed the phone back from Ethan, my hands shaking so badly I could barely navigate the screen. I clicked on Greg's profile. There were more photos. A picture of my mom laughing as she waded into the ocean. A picture of my dad and uncle playing shuffleboard at a resort. A video of the whole group singing karaoke at a beachside bar, posted just an hour ago, around the same time I was trying to call them, worried sick. Each photo was a dagger. They weren't just on vacation. They were having the time of their lives, completely unconcerned about the lie they had told or the event they were missing. The worst part was the comments section. Cousins, aunts, and distant relatives were all chiming in. "Looks amazing. Wish we were there. So great to see everyone together." Not a single person asked where I was. Not one person seemed to find it strange that the whole family was together celebrating, yet the daughter who was celebrating her engagement that very day was conspicuously absent. It was as if I didn't exist. Or worse, as if my role in the family was purely functional. The financier, the support system, the one you call when you need something, but not the one you invite to make memories. The #HashFamily first felt like a deliberate slap in the face. Their definition of family, it seemed, was conditional. I was family when the mortgage was due. I was family when they needed a loan for a new car. But when it came to celebrating, to being together again, I was an afterthought, a footnote in a social media post designed to showcase a perfect family portrait from which I had been deliberately cropped out. "Natasha, breathe," Ethan said, his hands on my shoulders, grounding me. "Just breathe." But I couldn't. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The love and joy I had felt just hours before were gone, replaced by a hollow, sickening feeling of betrayal. This wasn't a simple mistake or a miscommunication. This was a calculated deception. They had lied to my face, coordinated their stories, and then broadcast their betrayal for the entire world, or at least our entire extended family, to see. They didn't even have the decency to be discreet. My uncle tagging me felt like a final act of mockery, as if he wanted to make sure I saw exactly what I was missing, exactly how little I mattered in the grand scheme of their lives. That night, the perfect blueprint of my life showed its first major crack, a deep, structural flaw that I knew, with chilling certainty, could bring the whole thing crashing down. The rest of the night passed in a blur of shock and hurt. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that sunny beach photo, my family's smiling, treacherous faces burned into my mind. Ethan stayed up with me, holding me while I oscillated between silent tears and numb disbelief. He was furious on my behalf, his protective instincts on high alert. "What are you going to do?" he asked as dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of gray. "You have to call them. You have to confront them." I knew he was right, but the thought of it filled me with dread. What could I even say? "Hi, Mom. Hope Dad's feeling better. By the way, how's the weather in the Florida Keys?" The sarcasm felt bitter on my tongue. The lie was so blatant, so insulting, that a normal conversation seemed impossible. Part of me wanted to scream at them, to demand an explanation. But another, larger part of me was just tired. Tired of the dynamic, tired of feeling like an ATM, tired of my love and support being treated as a resource to be tapped rather than a gift to be cherished. Still, I had to try. I needed to hear it from them. Around 8 a.m., I took a deep breath and dialed my mom's number. I expected it to go to voicemail again, but this time, after 4 rings, she picked up. Her voice was groggy, as if she had just woken up. Natasha, honey, is everything okay? She asked, her tone laced with faux concern. The sheer audacity of it made my blood run cold. She was acting as if nothing had happened. I'm fine, Mom, I said, my voice tight. I was just calling to check on Dad. How is he feeling? There was a slight pause. I could hear the faint sound of seagulls in the background. Oh, you know, she said, her voice a little too breezy. He's much better this morning. A good night's rest did him a world of good. We were so sorry to miss your party. It must have been love. Really? Seagulls, she wasn't even trying to hide it. I decided to play along to see how deep the lie went. It was, I said, my voice flat. We missed you. So, what are you guys up to today? Just taking it easy at home. Another pause, this one longer. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she fabricated another lie. Yes, exactly. Just a quiet day. Maybe some gardening if Richard is up to it. We'll call you later to hear all about the party, okay? Mom, I said, cutting her off. Where are you? The silence on the other end of the line was heavy and damning. What do you mean, sweetie? She finally asked, her voice strained. We're at home. No, you're not, I said, the anger finally breaking through my carefully controlled tone. I saw Greg's post. I saw the pictures. You're in Florida, all of you, on a beach. The line went dead quiet. I heard a muffled sound, like she had covered the phone with her hand to speak to someone. My dad, probably. When she came back on, her voice had lost all its warmth. It was defensive, sharp. Natasha, you don't understand. This was a last-minute thing. Greg wanted to treat your father to get his spirits up. We didn't want to tell you because we didn't want you to feel bad. Feel bad? I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. You lied to me on my engagement day. You invented a story about Dad being sick so you could go on a secret family vacation. You think that doesn't make me feel bad? It wasn't a secret, she insisted, her voice growing louder. It was just for the core family, a little getaway. We were going to tell you all about it when we got back. The core family, I echoed, the phrase twisting in my gut. And I'm not part of that, is that it? I'm just the one who pays the bills so you can all go on your little getaways. That is not fair, and you know it, she snapped. We love you. Your uncle just wanted to do something nice for us. You're always so busy with your work and your new life. We didn't want to bother you. The excuses were so flimsy, so transparent, they were almost more insulting than the original lie. They weren't worried about bothering me, they were worried I'd object. They were worried I'd ask why the mortgage money I sent every month was apparently freeing them up for vacations they couldn't otherwise afford. The call devolved from there. She accused me of being ungrateful and dramatic. I accused her of being a liar and a user. In the end, she hung up on me. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, shaking with a rage so profound it felt like it was going to burn me up from the inside. Ethan came and wrapped his arms around me, but I barely felt him. I immediately tried calling my dad. It went straight to voicemail. His phone was off. I tried my Uncle Greg, straight to voicemail. They were circling the wagons, cutting me off. They had their story, and they were sticking to it. I was the ungrateful daughter who didn't understand. For the rest of the day, I was in a daze. I tried to work on a blueprint for a new client, but the lines on the page swam before my eyes. All I could think about was that conversation with my mom. The ease with which she lied, the way she twisted the situation to make me the bad guy, the complete lack of remorse. It was a masterclass in manipulation. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was a pattern, a deep-seated dysfunction that I had been enabling for years with my financial support. I had been so focused on being a good daughter that I hadn't realized I had become their enabler. I wasn't supporting them, I was subsidizing their disrespect. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts, no apology. It was clear they had no intention of reaching out, of trying to fix what they had broken. They were going to ride out their vacation and return home expecting me to just get over it, to fall back into my role as the dutiful, check-writing daughter. The realization settled over me with a cold, hard finality. They had made their choice. They had defined what family meant to them. Now it was time for me to define what it meant to me. The hurt was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, something else was beginning to form, a cold, clear sense of resolve. The unanswered calls were an answer in themselves. They had closed a door on me. They just didn't realize I was the one who owned the house. The next morning, the anger had cooled into a steely, analytical calm. As an architect, my job is to look at a structure, understand its weaknesses, and see how it's all held together. For the first time, I was looking at my family with that same dispassionate eye. Their entire lifestyle, I realized, was a structure I had helped build, but I had never bothered to inspect the foundations. Now, I was going to. The rage and the hurt were still there, simmering under the surface, but I channeled them into a single, focused objective. Aided to understand everything. I spent the next 2 days in a deep dive, not into blueprints, but into bank statements, emails, and old text messages. It was a forensic accounting of my own generosity. I started with the mortgage. 5 years ago, when they'd first asked for help, my father had sent me all the paperwork. They were behind, facing foreclosure, and I had swooped in to save the day. I had the account numbers, the bank, everything. I'd set up the autopay and had barely looked at it since, aside from noting the significant withdrawal from my account on the first of every month. The first thing I did was log into the mortgage portal online. It took me a few tries to remember the password, but I finally got in. What I found made my breath catch in my throat. I had been paying their mortgage for 60 consecutive months. But according to the bank's records, the original 30-year loan on their house had been paid off in full 8 months ago. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process the words. Loan status, paid. Balance, $0. Paid off? How? My monthly payments were just enough to cover the mortgage and taxes. They weren't large enough to accelerate the loan payoff by several years. I scrolled through the payment history, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it. A massive lump sum payment made 9 months prior that had wiped out the remaining principal. The amount was staggering, well over what my parents could ever have saved. The source of the payment wasn't listed, but I had a sick feeling I knew where it came from. My mind raced back. About a year ago, my Uncle Greg had sold a piece of commercial property he'd been holding onto for years. He'd bragged about the massive profit he'd made. At the time, I'd been happy for him. Now, I saw it in a different light. Could he have been the one who paid off the house? It seemed plausible. It would be just like him to make a grand gesture to become the family hero. But if the house was paid off, then where had my money been going for the last 8 months? My auto payment was still being withdrawn. I had the bank statements to prove it. I frantically searched the mortgage site for more information. After some digging, I found the transaction details. 8 months ago, the destination account for my auto payment had been changed. The money was no longer going to the mortgage company. It was being diverted into a different account at a different bank. An account I didn't recognize, but I could request the details. I put in a formal request for the full transaction history, including the receiving account holder's name. It would take a day or two to process, but I didn't need to wait. I already knew what I would find. They hadn't just let me keep paying a non-existent mortgage. They had actively redirected my money into their own pockets. For 8 months, the substantial sum I thought was saving their home had been going directly to them as a tax-free monthly allowance. An allowance they used to fund their comfortable, carefree retirement, to fund family vacations to the Florida Keys. The betrayal was so much deeper than just a missed party and a lie. This was calculated, long-term fraud. They had systematically deceived me for their own financial gain. The pieces started clicking into place with horrifying clarity. The vague answers whenever I asked about their finances. The way they brushed off my suggestions to downsize or create a budget. The new golf clubs, the weekend trips, the dinners out. It wasn't just my mortgage payment funding this. It was the entire mortgage payment, now unburdened from its actual purpose, flowing directly into their leisure fund. My uncle paying off the house wasn't an act of generosity towards them. It was the setup for a coordinated deception against me. He made them debt-free, and they all saw an opportunity. Instead of telling me, "Thank you, Natasha, you can stop paying now," they saw a chance to double dip. They could have a paid-off house thanks to Greg, and a fat monthly check thanks to their clueless daughter. The family first hashtag from Greg's post now felt like a declaration of war. Their core family was a conspiracy, a club of which I was not a member, but the primary sponsor. I thought back to every conversation over the past year, every time my mom had sighed about how they couldn't have managed without me, every time my dad had clapped me on the back and called me their rock. Each memory was now tainted, twisted into a cruel parody of familial love. They weren't expressions of gratitude. They were acts of manipulation, designed to keep me compliant, to keep the money flowing. I felt a profound sense of foolishness wash over me, so sharp it was almost painful. How could I have been so blind? I had wanted to believe in the best version of my parents, the loving and supportive figures I remembered from my childhood. I had ignored the red flags because acknowledging them LD have meant acknowledging a painful truth, that my relationship with my family was entirely transactional. I wasn't their daughter, I was their asset. By the end of the day, I had a folder on my computer filled with screenshots, bank statements, and a timeline of the deception. The paper trail of their lies was undeniable. They had built a comfortable life on a foundation of my money and their deceit. But as an architect, I knew that any structure built on a faulty foundation is destined to collapse. The only question was who was going to be the one to kick out the supports. And as I sat there, staring at the proof of their fraud, I knew the answer. The storm wasn't just coming, I was going to be the storm. The official confirmation from the bank arrived in my inbox on Tuesday morning. The account my monthly payments had been diverted to was a joint checking account in the names of Richard and Diane last name. My parents. Seeing it in black and white, an official document confirming the fraud, extinguished the last lingering ember of doubt or hope for a misunderstanding. This was real. It was calculated. And it was over. For the past couple of days, while I waited for this final piece of evidence, I had been a ghost in my own life. Ethan knew something was wrong, of course. He saw the dark circles under my eyes and the way I stared blankly at my computer screen for hours. I told him I was uncovering some financial discrepancies related to my parents, but I didn't give him the full, sordid details yet. I needed to have my plan in place first. I needed to be clear-headed and decisive, not a victim reacting to pain. "Are you going to confront them when they get back?" he asked gently that evening, placing a mug of tea on my desk. "Oh, I'm not going to confront them," I said, my voice eerily calm. "They are going to confront me." He looked at me, puzzled. I just gave him a small, grim smile. He didn't press further. He trusted me. That simple act of faith was such a stark contrast to my own family's behavior that it strengthened my resolve. My plan wasn't born of rage, though rage was certainly a component. It was born of logic. As an architect, I solve problems by changing the structure. Their financial structure, their entire lifestyle, relied on a single support beam, my monthly payment. My countermove was simple. I was going to remove it. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. I logged into my online banking portal. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I navigated to the scheduled payments section. There it was, the payment that had been the cornerstone of my relationship with my parents for 5 years. Recipient, Richard and Diane last name. Amount, a very substantial sum. Frequency, monthly on the 1st. The next payment was scheduled to go out in 6 days. With a steady hand, I moved the cursor over to the cancel button. For a moment, I paused. A lifetime of memories flashed through my mind. My dad teaching me to ride a bike, my mom reading me bedtime stories. The loving parents of my childhood. Were they gone, or had they never really existed? Had I just been a long-term investment they were finally cashing in? The thought was so cold, so clinical, that it made the next action easy. I clicked the button. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment?" I didn't hesitate. I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed and the payment line item was gone, just like that. A 5-year habit, a 5-year pillar of their lives, erased with a single, silent click. There was no fanfare, no dramatic confrontation, no tearful phone call. It was a quiet, digital execution. I felt a strange sense of lightness, as if a massive weight I didn't even realize I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't just about the money. It was about taking back control. For years, they had controlled the narrative, manipulated my emotions, and exploited my sense of duty. Tonight, I had severed the puppet strings. The next few days were the longest of my life. I knew from their social media posts that they were due back from Florida on Thursday. I imagined them arriving home, tanned and relaxed, completely oblivious to the fact that their world was about to change. They would unpack their souvenirs, do their laundry, and settle back into their comfortable routine, all the while assuming that on the first of the month, their secret slush fund would be replenished as always. I told Ethan everything on Wednesday night. I laid out the bank statements, the mortgage records, the whole sordid story. I watched as his face hardened with anger, the same protective fury I'd seen the night of the party. "I can't believe them," he breathed, shaking his head. "Natasha, I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm not anymore, I'm just done." "What do you think will happen?" He asked. "Well," I began, taking a sip of my wine, "the first of the month is Friday. They'll probably check their account at some point that day, expecting to see my payment. When it's not there, they'll assume it's a bank error. They might call the bank. They'll be annoyed, maybe a little stressed. They won't call me because that would mean admitting they know where the money is supposed to go. They'll wait. By Monday, when the money still isn't there, they'll start to panic. My dad isn't a patient man. He'll convince himself there's a problem with my account. And because he feels entitled to that money, he won't call and ask politely. He will drive here, angry and demanding answers." Ethan stared at me. "You've really thought this through." "An architect always anticipates the stresses on the structure," I said. "And I predict the primary support will be storming up my driveway on Tuesday at the latest." I spent the weekend feeling strangely calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar pang of anxiety that came with seeing my bank balance drop on the first of the month. I didn't feel the subtle resentment of funding a lifestyle I wasn't even invited to be a part of. Ethan and I went on a hike, we had dinner at his restaurant, we worked on plans for our wedding. We were building our own foundation, one based on honesty and mutual respect. The silence from my family was complete. They were back home, but they hadn't called. No apology, no explanation, just an arrogant, entitled silence. They were waiting for me to break, to call them, to smooth things over like I always did. They had no idea that this time, I wasn't the one who was going to break. The structure of their lives was about to be hit by a seismic event, and it had all started with the quiet click of a canceled payment. Tuesday arrived exactly as I had predicted. It was a bright, sunny morning, and I was in my home office reviewing a set of blueprints when I heard the sound of a car screeching to a halt in my driveway. I didn't even need to look up. I knew that sound. It was my father's old sedan, driven with the kind of aggression that only comes from pure entitlement. I took a slow, deep breath, stood up from my desk, and walked to the front window. There he was, my dad, Richard, storming out of his car. His face was beet red, a mask of righteous fury. He didn't even bother to close the car door properly as he marched towards my front door. My mom, Diane, was in the passenger seat. She didn't get out. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, the picture of passive complicity. The doorbell rang not once but in a series of sharp, impatient jabs. I ignored it. A moment later, the pounding started. "Natasha, open this door. I know you're in there. We need to talk." His voice was a roar, the voice of a man who believed he had been wronged and was here to demand his due. I let him pound for another 30 seconds, savoring the silence inside my house, the peace he was so desperately trying to shatter. Ethan came to stand behind me, a silent, solid presence at my back. He simply asked, "Ready?" I nodded. I was more than ready. I walked to the front door, unlocked it, and pulled it open. I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind me, creating a physical barrier. Ethan remained just inside, visible through the glass pane, a clear signal that I was not alone. I crossed my arms and looked at my father. He stood there, panting slightly, his face contorted with anger. "It's about time," he barked. "What's going on? There's a problem with the bank." It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "No, Dad," I said, my voice calm and level. There's no problem with the bank. His eyes narrowed. He was clearly confused by my lack of panic. What are you talking about? The payment didn't go through. It's the 5th of the month. It's never been late before. You need to call them and fix it. There's nothing to fix, I said, keeping my voice steady. I canceled the payment. The words hung in the air between us. His angry expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock, which was quickly followed by indignant rage. You what? You canceled it. Why on earth would you do that? You can't just do that. We rely on that money. Yes, I said, nodding slowly. I know you do. Which is why I found it so interesting that the house you rely on that money for was actually paid off 8 months ago. The color drained from his face. In the car, I saw my mother flinch, her head turning away as if she couldn't bear to watch. My father was speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. He had walked in here expecting a simple argument about a bank error, fully prepared to bully me into fixing it. He was not prepared for me to know the truth. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his bluster completely gone. Don't you? I asked, taking a step forward. Let me refresh your memory. For 60 months, I have faithfully paid your mortgage. 5 years of ensuring you had a roof over your heads. But 8 months ago, that mortgage ceased to exist. And instead of telling me, instead of thanking me and releasing me from that obligation, you and Mom and Uncle Greg decided to get creative. You changed the payment destination. You started funneling my money directly into your own checking account. I let the accusation land hard. You stole from me, I said, the words clear and sharp. For 8 months, you have been stealing from your own daughter. And what did you do with that stolen money? You used it to fund a secret family vacation to Florida. A vacation you lied about to miss my engagement party. A party celebrating the future of the daughter you were actively defrauding. He recoiled as if I had physically struck him. It wasn't like that, he whispered, his voice weak. Greg paid off the house. He wanted to help. We were going to tell you. When? I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. When were you going to tell me? After another year of payments. After another secret vacation. When you were posting pictures with the caption, "Family First," while deliberately excluding me. Don't you dare stand on my property, in front of the house that I built with my own hard work and honesty, and lie to my face again. He finally broke. All the anger, all the entitlement crumbled away, revealing the weak, grasping man underneath. We needed the money, Natasha, he pleaded, his voice cracking. My pension isn't enough. We just got used to. We didn't know how to stop. You could have stopped by telling the truth, I said coldly. You could have stopped by having an honest conversation. But you didn't. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. And choices have consequences. From the car, my mother finally got out. She scurried over, her face pale and tear-streaked. Sweetie, please, she begged, reaching for my arm. I pulled it away. It was a mistake. We're so sorry. Please don't do this. We can't manage without your help. I looked from her pathetic, pleading face to my father's defeated one. The last 5 years, I had bent over backwards for them. I had sacrificed my own financial goals to ensure their comfort. And this was the thanks I got. Deceit, betrayal, and now a pathetic, self-serving apology that only came after they were caught. I walked outside and declared, the arrangement is over. Not just the payment. Everything. You are not welcome at my home. You are not welcome in my life. You talk about family first? Well, for the first time in a long time, I'm putting my new family first. The one I'm building with Ethan. A family based on trust and honesty, not theft and manipulation. You made your choice when you decided to lie. Now I'm making mine. I turned without another word, walked back into my house and locked the door. I could hear my mother start to sob, my father yelling my name, a desperate, hollow sound. I didn't look back. I leaned against the door, the wood cool against my back, and took a deep, shuddering breath. The confrontation was over. The storm had hit, and their house of cards had come tumbling down. And as I stood there, listening to them finally get back in their car and drive away, I didn't feel sadness. I felt free. The weeks following the confrontation were strangely quiet. My phone, which used to be filled with calls and texts from my mother about trivial things, remained silent. My father and uncle, who I now realized had been working in concert, made no attempt to contact me. It was as if a toxic limb had been amputated. The initial phantom pains of what I thought a family should be were gradually replaced by the clean, healing piece of reality. They hadn't been a family to me in a long time. They had been a liability. Ethan was my rock through it all. He never once said, "I told you so," even though he had harbored suspicions about their dependency for years. He simply supported me, listened when I needed to talk, and helped me focus on the future, our future. We threw ourselves into wedding planning, but this time, the guest list was much smaller and infinitely more meaningful. It was comprised of people who genuinely loved and supported us, our chosen family. There was no room for obligation or deceit. About a month after the driveway showdown, I received a package in the mail. It was a thick manila envelope with no return address, but I recognized my mother's shaky handwriting. Inside was not a letter of apology, but a collection of old photo albums. Pictures of me as a baby, my first day of school, family vacations from when I was a child. There was a single sticky note attached to the top album. It read, "So you don't forget where you came from." It was a classic move, a guilt trip packaged in nostalgia. A few months ago, it would have worked. I would have cried, felt the pull of family. I'll duty, and probably would have called them. But something inside me had fundamentally changed. I looked at the photos of the smiling, happy family, and I felt a profound sense of mourning, not for what I had lost, but for what had never truly been real. The people in those photos were not the people who had lied to and stolen from me. Or perhaps they were, and I had just been too young to see it. I closed the album, put everything back in the envelope, and stored it in the attic. I wouldn't forget where I came from, but I would no longer let it define where I was going. The real fallout came from my Uncle Greg. He, of course, was furious that his role in the scheme had been exposed, and more importantly, that the cash flow had been cut off. He tried a different tactic: public shaming. He posted vague, passive-aggressive statuses on social media about ungrateful children and forgetting the people who raised you. It was a transparent attempt to rally the extended family to his side. It backfired spectacularly. One of my cousins, who had always been closer to me, finally called me to ask what was going on. I told her the whole, unvarnished truth, from the fake illness on my engagement day to the 8 months of fraudulent payments. She was horrified. The news spread through the family grapevine like wildfire. Suddenly, Uncle Greg's vague posts looked less like righteous indignation and more like the pathetic whining of a man caught in a contemptible scheme. The family, which had been so quick to celebrate together in Florida, was now fractured by the ugly reality of what that celebration had been funded by. Some sided with my parents out of misguided loyalty, but many others were disgusted. They saw my parents and uncle not as victims, but as perpetrators of a cruel and calculated betrayal. The biggest change, however, was in me. Free from the financial and emotional burden of my parents, I felt a new sense of clarity and purpose. The money I had been pouring into their paid-off house was now being invested in my own future. Ethan and I accelerated our savings, bought a neighboring plot of land we'd been dreaming of, and I started drafting the blueprints for an extension to our home, a studio for me, and a large, professional-grade kitchen for him. We were literally building our dreams. My parents ended up having to sell the house. Without my monthly contribution, they couldn't afford the property taxes, insurance, and the upkeep on their lifestyle. I heard through the family grapevine that they downsized to a small condo in a retirement community an hour away. They were living on my dad's pension and my mom's part-time library salary, the budget they should have been on all along. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a quiet sense of justice. It was the natural consequence of their choices. Our wedding day was beautiful. It was a small, intimate ceremony in the backyard of the home we had built together, the same spot where my disastrous engagement party had taken place. But this time, there were no shadows, no nagging feelings of disappointment. It was filled with laughter, joy, and the unconditional love of our friends. As Ethan and I said our vows, I looked out at the faces of our guests, our real family, and I knew I had made the right choice. I had spent years being the primary support for a structure that was rotten at its core. When I finally found the courage to step back, it collapsed under the weight of its own deceit, as all poorly built things do. And from the rubble, I was free to draw a new blueprint, not just for a house, but for a life. A life built on a foundation of honesty, respect, and true partnership. A life that was all my own design.